strike. And so if you want to look at the human equivalent of this, just look at the declining health of the American population as we just live under the spell of this idea that we should allow third-party payers, forget whether you think they have our best interests at heart or don't. In some respects, I'm sure they do, and others maybe they don't. The point is that it's completely un-American. We're allowing third parties, the government, whatever, to decide for us what we will and will not have access to as it pertains to managing our most important asset. It's ridiculous on the face of it. What's even more ridiculous is that the things that are censored out of reach for us are not $100,000 surgeries and extraordinary imaging technologies that cost a gajillion dollars. They happen to be things that are shockingly affordable. And this isn't just a hypnosis that we as consumers are under, it's a hypnosis that healthcare providers are under. I was talking about this at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is, as the name suggests, a group of doctors and healthcare providers fixated with using lifestyle literally as treatment, not just as prevention, but as treatment for disease. And so I sat in on their society meeting the night before my little talk, and I'm listening to them talk about the challenges of lifestyle medicine. They said, well, once again this year, the #1 challenge facing lifestyle medicine is insurance reimbursement. The insurers just won't pay. And so I kind of filed that away because everyone's like nodding their head, oh, it's insurance. And so we go to the next day. And so I said at the start of my talk, in sort of an unplanned way, I said, well, who was at the meeting last night? Oh, everyone was. I said, anybody remember the #1 problem facing lifestyle medicine? Oh, insurance, everyone says in unison. I says, who here wishes insurance would pay for lifestyle medicine? All the hands go up. I said, well, this is interesting. I said, so what percentage of the population do you think needs lifestyle medicine? And they kind of chuckled, well, everyone needs lifestyle medicine. I said, okay, now you guys are the lifestyle medicine people, got lots of patients doing this. How many of you have seen a patient forced into bankruptcy or even financial hardship by the overwhelming cost of lifestyle medicine? People kind of laughed. It's like, it's not expensive. So my last question is, why on earth would you wish that an insurance product would be used for something that 100% of us need, there's no risk attached to it, and it's completely affordable? It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to contribute, except for the fact that it allows lifestyle medicine to conform to this ridiculous hypnosis that we're all under. The fact of the matter is it contributes only friction, and it only manipulates the market for things. The worst thing sometimes that can happen to a preventive technology in medicine is that it is reimbursed. A great example of which, carotid ultrasound. By far the cheapest, most painless, safe way of looking into the cardiovascular risk that you have through your carotid arteries with nothing more than some jelly on your neck. Everyone's like, oh, it should be paid for, it should be paid for. Finally in Texas they start paying for it. Well, guess what? They reimburse it at such a low rate of pay, no one can afford the technology or the process of actually doing it. And so guess what? By reimbursing it, it's even further out of reach than it was before. And so we don't want to invite third parties to manipulate a marketplace that doesn't require its intervention. And so we don't need to lie. And it's so funny because think about the self-destructive behavior of this society, which is all charged up to go try and raise money to lobby that lifestyle medicine be reimbursed by insurance. It doesn't make any sense. So we need to be understanding of the fact that health is not only a skill, but it's an asset that we simply have to invest in. Now, at this moment in time, this is a really horrible reality because health insurance is so ridiculously expensive and seems to cover less and less all the time. So at a moment in time where it's like the premiums are going up, you're telling people, well, and not only that, but it appears that you actually have to invest in preventive maintenance and growing this asset of yours, which is your health. And so it's a horrible message to have to deliver, but the fact of the matter is, it's just the way it is. And so that's kind of, that's the fifth belief. Now, I said for fun, I wanted to show you a couple of things. So one of the things that, that our work involves at N1 Health is correcting yet another problem that is absolutely atrocious when you think about it. And it looks something like this. How long would you guess that it takes a proven technology, not a pharmaceutical, but any other technology or protocol for that matter, it's proven to work, to find its way out of the proof and into day-to-day practice of medicine? What would you guess?
15 years.
Bingo! 15 years. 15 15 years. So I said, what would a cell phone, what did a cell phone look like 15 years ago? So today we live in the day and time of the iPhone 5S, and we are managing our health with the Nokia brick that we all used to carry in 1999. Imagine if someone said, you now have to have that cell phone. How incredibly pissed you would be to have to walk around with this useless piece of nothing that doesn't do anything more than make a call and check a voicemail, when you can be doing everything you can do on a computer and more on the other thing. Well, literally, we are entrusting our most valuable asset to the Nokia brick at the exclusion of the iPhone 5S because of the hypnosis that we live under. Think about what has to happen for this breakthrough to find its way into your doctor's office. Number one, your doctor's seeing 30 patients a day at 7-minute clips, barely able to make ends meet, needs to somehow learn about this thing. Then, of course, the insurers need to decide they're going to pay for it, because if they don't, no doctor's going to buy it. They're all going broke, at the primary care level, so if it costs anything, you're pretty well out of luck because there's no money to buy it. And if they magically could get it into their office, they're working so daggone fast that there's no way they can weave it into their workflow, and so the odds of you actually seeing it, even if they did buy it, you wouldn't believe the dusty warehouses of technologies that never made it into the workflow that many doctors actually have. These are the hurdles that a breakthrough needs to climb over in order to actually benefit you in the ordinary practice of medicine. So I wanted to just take a moment or two to show you two things that I've discovered and think are absolutely fascinating, and speak to it probably is the 15-year future of medicine, but in fact it is accessible within the next year or two. The first, well, both have to do with this idea as we human beings, as human data signal engines. So increasingly, it's become appreciated that we are just emitting data all the time. You have your heart rate and your weight and your blood pressure and your lab values, and as we get more and more sophisticated technology, not only are we breeding a culture of people quite interested in quantifying these things, which is sort of fun. I notice John has his activity tracker on his wrist, as many of us probably do. And so it's interesting to quantify these things. And in partnership with someone to tell you sort of how to direct your efforts, the quantification is not only fun, but it can actually help you to prioritize your efforts. But technologists are beginning to say, okay, what else, as we have more and more sensitive technology, what else can we see in there, and what can we do with this data? So one of the most interesting things that I've seen has to do with this. So this is a mammogram. It shows that we have a calcification here, so this is bad news if you've seen something like this. And this is kind of the way that we look for breast cancer. We look for actually what is very advanced is it takes a while for something like this to show up calcified, vessels have formed. This is not an early stage diagnosis technology. So in the West Coast, there's a group of technologists that have discovered that, and oddly, the technology for this resides in developing a fascinating silicon wafer that looks sort of like an oversized DVD with no hole in the middle. And the magic of what they do is in the fact that they're able to design these things to be literally, physically identical to one another, and have what they call hundreds of thousands of peptide arrays that from a single drop of blood, put in like a diabetic strip and mailed in, can be dissolved, put onto this wafer, and can show our immune system responding to things. Not just breast cancer, but 32 different diseases. Now they've chosen to look at breast, colon, prostate, and lung cancer, and here's what it looks like. They've discovered that your immune system's own response to these different assaults produce different immune system signatures on these peptide arrays. So a normal person with no disease process might look like this. Breast cancer has a signature of its own, prostate has a signature, colon, lung, and the sensitivity and specificity of this test is miraculous. It's something like 98%. And so this idea of watching our immune system at the very earliest stages responding to different types of assaults in an incredibly affordable way. This is not an expensive lab test. Right out of the chute before it's reimbursed by insurance, it's like a $100, $150 test. It can be done with a drop of blood. I mean, it's not. There's nothing to it. And so this, I expect, is probably something that we will find coming our way in the not too distant future, which is a magnificent, even if they did nothing more than these 4 diseases, what a magnificent breakthrough this is. The second one that I wanted to share with you is possibly the coolest thing that I've ever even heard of, much less seen. And it has to do with it actually got its start, I don't know, 120 or so years ago, when it was discovered that our bodies are largely electrical engines. And someone attached some wires to somebody back in the late 1800s and discovered that, in fact, as your heart contracts and expands, the polarization and depolarization of your heart muscle creates an electrical current that can be picked up with certain types of sensors that obviously aren't terribly breakthrough since they were around over 100 years ago. And you could get these squiggly lines out. And so, as time went by, over the course of the early 1900s, a guy started to look at these squiggly lines on more and more people and discovered, gosh, people who had a heart attack, had some sort of interruption in the squiggle, other types of problems they could detect back then looked like this on the squiggle. And so he attached 5 different letters to abnormalities in the squiggles that corresponded to structural and functional and pathological issues with your heart. And in 1924, I believe, won a Nobel Prize in medicine for inventing a technology that is still largely unaltered. It's a little bit cooler today than it was then, but I mean, it's basically the same kind of thing. And what's really crazy is it's like, we're learning about the heart, but we have some sensors up here at the heart, which kind of makes sense, but what's up with these down on the ankles and the wrist? The way this electricity travels about our body is not intuitive. It's kind of interesting and mysterious how a sensor on your ankle can tell you something about your heart. So this is 100 years ago, and we're still using it widely today. So this is an image of the tip of my finger that was taken with a camera that was invented. Actually, the camera wasn't entirely, it's been modified, but this is the invention of the head of medical and radiological physics from the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, who since 1997 or 98 has been fascinated with a new data stream that 100 years later we're able to pick up. Back in the old days, 100 years ago, it was a pretty good victory to be able to pick up electricity from an organ the size of your fist. Today, scientists are researching the electrical activity inside a single cell. And it turns out that the way our cells communicate have a lot to do with these, these transmission of these electrical signals. Something about stepping on a nail and at the speed of light we know to pick up our foot. There's a lot of distance has to be traveled, a lot of nerve endings and whatever, and it turns out that these electrical signals are translated into tiny little impulses called biophotons that move about our body all the time. This image is gathered by stimulating off the tip of your fingers, which have a lot of nerve endings. It stimulates that electricity with 20,000 volts of electricity underneath this diode, and it captures as light the electricity, the electrical chatter coming out of our entire system. And you gather one of these off each of your 10 fingers. It turns out, this isn't new. People have been capturing pictures like this for more than 15 years. What this woman did, though, like the squiggle guy, was look at about 10,000 of these at the Mayo Clinic working in their radiation oncology department, and discovered that there's a great wealth of intelligence encoded in this bizarre-looking pattern, and that if you could reduce it to software, it could be interpreted. This is but a tiny portion of the information fetched out of that image. It tells you about the structure and function of every single organ system in your entire body. This is just a look at the GI and endocrine system. Down here is respiratory. Big numbers are worse than small. It looks at things that are produced by